Thank you very much, Wendy. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk in front of everyone today, virtually, or as I used to miss the in-live sessions. But I thank you very much. I do appreciate your time today. We have half an hour to discuss the launch of our new product. Before I start on this, though, I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about why Equitable Life decided to do this. And strategically, we sat down and said, there's an opportunity here for us not only to be first to the market with this product, but to really help advisors develop a relationship with the younger generation, clients that we always talk about, but we kind of do have a hard time outreaching to them. And so, we talk about juvenile insurance, we talk about term insurance, stuff that can resonate. But as far as investment products, it's always hard to reach out to them because they're debt heavy. And so this is probably the first product that has the ability to enlist their attention, to enlist their help in working with you in order to save for probably the most timely issue of today, which is the affordability of their first home purchase. So Equitable Life strategically decided we want to be the first insurance company in this space. So 2 weeks ago, we finally got approval and launched this product. I'm going to show you why it was important to do this right away, because there will be some key specifics about it. But for the time being, let's go on and talk about the presentation. Okay, so I'll keep going then. Okay, so the bare bones of the first home savings account, the FHSA, is as it is today. However, based on my experience, I fully anticipate that these limits and the limitations will be expanded upon. If not by this government, then perhaps the next one incoming. So as it stands today, the limit of contribution annually for the FHSA is $8,000. Lifetime limit of $40,000, meaning that this could be fully funded inside of 5 years. And the client can then make sure that they withdraw the money for a qualified home purchase. Now, the tax implications, contributions are tax deferred. And so think of this as if you will, as a RSP. And as you make the contribution, you get a tax receipt. The tax receipt will be good for the income in this year. The withdrawals will be tax-free. However, it's for withdrawals on a qualified home purchase, not just ad hoc withdrawals for the sake of vacations or emergency fund. There'll be no tax on investment gains, which is a good thing. So like the TFSA, like the RSP. But again, we have to watch for that withdrawal, make sure that it's for the purchase of a qualified first home. Now, who can use it? Canadian residents, including immigrants, new to Canada. If you have a temporary SIN number, you can apply and have one opened between the ages of 18 and 71. Again, this will act like an RSP, so it needs to be converted by the age of 71 into another registered plan. You have to be qualified as a first-time home buyer. And so you must have a written agreement to buy or build a qualified home before October 1st of the following year, following the withdrawal. Meaning, if you're doing a pre-build, make sure it's just before you sign the agreement, and there's no delays in that. Make sure that you intend to occupy the home as the principal place of residence within 1 year of buying or building it. Meaning, this is not for your Airbnb portfolio. This is not for investment properties. This is not a commercial or vacation spot account. This is for your first principal residence. And so that's important to note. Now, here we get to the crux of why Equitable Life wanted to push this and make sure that we opened and got approval for this plan this year. Is because according to the CRA, the FHSA participation period only begins when the account is open, meaning you have to actually open an account with Equitable Life before that contribution room and before you have the ability to participate in this type of plan. Unlike the TFSA, where I can open one up this year for the first time in my life, and I can take it back to 2009 when it was first launched. This works differently. And so I want you to be aware that we open one up this year. That means that 15-year clock starts ticking on. And a situation where the CRA has deemed that a maximum of 15-year participation cap means it's either a take it or leave it, use it or lose it type scenario. And I'll explain what I mean later on in the presentation. But for the time being, let's see, a client named Steve opens up the FHSA with Equitable Life this year, invests the full $8,000. Next year, the client's going to start getting a notice of assessment indicating their available contribution room. So much like advisors do use that notice of assessment for RSP contribution room, TFSA contribution room, I strongly urge you to make sure that any client you take on, you have a copy of that notice of assessment, because it will also indicate the contribution limit for the FHSA. So in this situation, Steve continues to invest $8,000 in their Pivotal Select FHSA account. Now, carry forward 3 years, Steve has the ability to carry forward up to $8,000 only of unused contribution room from the previous calendar year. So this is a hard cap, meaning you cannot invest any more than $16,000 to catch you up to that maximum contribution. So it's not like the TFSA, as I mentioned earlier, which means I can't catch up all in one fell swoop. It's only the previous year, and it's only to a maximum of $16,000. Now, in this situation, 10 years down the road, Steve decides to buy his first home, withdraws his balance on the account that he's made over the last 10 years. And so moving forward, he can collapse the account, use the proceeds in order to pay down the mortgage or to pay down the first down payment. Now, again, keep in mind, there is a use it or lose it scenario in 15 years. And we'll go through what Equitable Life will do to help you as advisors in that scenario. Now, other things can happen in life. As we know, life is messy sometimes. So here's a few other situations that might impact the FHSA contract. One is obviously a marital breakdown. So the CRA has deemed that an amount can be transferred from the FHSA of one spouse to the FHSA or RSP of the other spouse. Meaning, if only one spouse had an FHSA opened, they can equalize by transferring a portion to their soon-to-be divorced spouse so that they can open up an FHSA or just simply transfer to their RSP. One thing to note is that it does not affect the FHSA contribution room of the recipient, meaning that spouse does not need to have that contribution room in order to receive the transfer. However, also important to note, the transferring spouse does not regenerate contribution room in their FHSA by doing that. It's not like a TFSA where if I take out $100,000, I can put another $100,000 in next year. So it's important to note that the transfer can take place, but it does not regenerate or reinstate contribution room for the transferring spouse. Now, another situation, which is, again, we see this typically in a seg fund contract where the spouse is named successor annuitant. In the case of an FHSA, it's only a spouse or common law partner that can be named as a successor annuitant, meaning they're the only ones that can become the owner of the contract without affecting their own contribution room, but take over the contract in force as a seg fund. So if you're a widower, if you're single, if you're young and not yet married, you cannot name a successor annuitant. You can only name that as a spouse. However, also, in the contracts, there is a beneficiary designation. We use it all the time. However, in this situation, you have to be careful because if it's a spouse, they do not get to choose whether or not they want to take the contract up in force or whether they want to get paid out as beneficiaries. Usually with registered plans, depending on the insurance company, you can make that choice at the time of death. This time, if it's a beneficiary designation, it's there to be paid out. If it's not a spouse, the proceeds are taxable, meaning the amount paid to the beneficiary is included in their income for tax purposes, as well taxes withheld on the payment. So important to note, if you have a family situation where it's two parents and a child, and one of them passes away, better that the spouse is the successor annuitant or the partner is the successor annuitant, and then the beneficiary is one of the children, two of the children, however many children there are. That way, they would only receive the proceeds if and only if their surviving parent passes on. So important to note that. Again, the spouse does not have a choice in this situation where they can keep the contract in force or get paid out. Only if their successor annuitant can they keep the contract in force. A few more things to watch out for. One, very important, I mentioned that notice of assessment is because overcontributions will be taxed at 1% per month. CRA loves to do this, and so that 1% will be levied on any month or partial month if you overcontribute. So if you were to open up a contract and make a $9,000 contribution this month, you would be levied 4 months worth of 1% taxation on that overcontribution. After which, in January 1st, that $1,000 over contribution will eat away that 2024 contribution to the tune of $1,000. So again, we don't want to hand our clients a big tax bill. Want to make sure that we monitor that. Again, that notice of assessment form is key to maintaining control of this account. Also, as I mentioned earlier, this is probably the best plan developed and launched for purchasing or for saving for purchasing of a home. Don't use this as your vacation fund. Don't use this as your emergency fund. Use it for what it's intended. Not to say that we're going to ban withdrawals. Obviously, that's not in the cards. But we want to make sure that the client understands that if they withdraw and it's not for a qualifying home purchase, it's going to be withheld at source. Tax is going to be withheld at source based on the same withholding rates as an RSP. So 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 percent. 10%, 20%, 30%. And so also that contribution room is not reinstated. So if I take that money out because I need to go travel around the world or for emergency purposes, that contribution room is not automatically reinstated. So if I've maxed out the contribution of $40,000, that's it. I can't add more money by taking some money out. And so it's important to note that once you've reached that hard limit, that's it. Also, to note, if you're talking to an older client and they're indicating that they want to make a contribution on behalf of their kids or grandkids, there is no third-party contribution in this situation, no spousal contributions either. The money has to be gifted to that spouse or child in order for them to contribute to their own FHSA. So if you don't trust your kids and you don't want to hand them a check for $8,000 because they're going to run out and buy the best sound system or entertainment system at Best Buy, then you probably shouldn't gift them that money. But typically, we know and we understand that the older generation may want to help by making that contribution to them. So in all intents and purposes, gifting is the only way to contribute to that. Also, contributions from a RIF are not to be allowed. And so we cannot transfer RIF proceeds to an FHSA directly because, again, the contribution to the FHSA, one, cannot be made after the age of 71, and two, it needs to be triggered so that you have a contribution receipt, meaning it has to be after tax dollars. So a tax-free transfer from a RIF will not work in this situation. Now, let's compare the pre-established account of the home buyer's plan with the current FHSA, and you'll see that there's clear advantages to the launch of the FHSA. Both are to be used for first home purchase. We know that. Contribution limit for this, as I mentioned, is $40,000. We knew that the home buyer's plan, you can only take up to $35,000. Used to be $25,000, but now it's $35,000. The withdrawal amount. Here's one of the key strategic reasons why Equitable wanted to come to the market now rather than wait until later. The way the markets are right now, we know, I mean, it's negative again today. It's a bad September. If you were to invest and purchase a seg fund with $8,000 right now, what would it be worth 10 years down the road, 5 years down the road? Chances are that market value is going to be up, and it's going to be up substantially. So that withdrawal amount, there's no limit on it. If that $40,000 contribution that your clients made over the course of 5 years is now grown to be $80,000, they can take the entire amount. Unlike the home buyers plan where it's capped at $35,000, there is no limit on the withdrawal amount towards the home purchase. So if you want to liquidate the entire account and that account has grown substantially from the $40,000 you've contributed, by all means, there is no limit on that. Also, key to note is that there's no repayment required. Meaning, unlike the home buyers plan, which has a 15-year schedule of repayment on that tax-free, essentially that interest-free loan, the repayment requirements here are non-existent. Once you take the money out, you close the FHSA account, you're free to go about your purchase. And so that's the key benefit. I think this is one of the key benefits is there's no limit on the withdrawal amount and there's no repayment required. Now, both can be used in combination to fund your first home purchase. Again, you want to bring as much money to bear on that down payment. And if you have a spouse or a common law partner, you can actually bring to bear about $150,000 combined. So again, a lot of advantages to this FHSA. One thing to note, again, I talk about that participating period. This is the reason why Equitable wanted to come to the market is because that period doesn't start until you actually open an account. So we wanted to give clients and advisors an opportunity, an advantage in taking advantage of that contribution for this year. But remember, the FHSA is shelter for tax only until you withdraw to purchase a qualified home. If you withdraw from the program by cashing out, there will be tax withheld, as I mentioned, 10%, 20%, 30%. If you're transferring to an RSP or RIF, it's tax deferred. As you know, withdrawals from an RSP or from a RIF will be taxed at that time. But remember, the participating period ends after 15 years are up from when you open up the contract. And so it's a use it or lose it scenario. Keep in mind and keep track of the deadline, December 31st of the 15th anniversary year. So if you're opening up one this year, it'll be 2038, or when the client turns 71. So it's like converting an RSP to a RIF. It's when the client turns 71 and it's up to December 31st of that year. I'm going to share what Equitable Life has done to help you in that regards, but key notices here. If you're selling your book of business, if you're moving away from the business and have stopped dealing with clients, you want to have these diarized in your system. You want to have your contact management system pop up in 2038 and say, hey, you better talk to John Smith because his participating window on this FHSA program is up and coming. And you don't want to just necessarily hand a client a tax bill and say, congratulations, your plan is now deregistered. You got to pay taxes on this. Now, true to form, CRA has taken their time in developing all the necessary forms for this plan. So all we know right now is that transfers from an RSP to an FHSA can be done on a tax-deferred basis. The CRA form is RC 720. However, all the other transfers the forms are still to be developed. So CRA will move on it. It's just they're not being very proactive about it. They're being more reactionary. So an FHSA to FHSA transfer, as I mentioned, equalizing payments on a marital breakdown, that form number has not been invented yet. That form has not been developed. When it does get developed, we'll have a copy of it on our website and we'll notify all our advisors. Also, FHSA to RSP transfer. So as I mentioned, at the end of the participation period, roll over to an RSP. They haven't developed that form number yet, but I'll tell you how Equitable can help in that regards. One thing to note here, very important. Moving money from a spousal RSP to an FHSA will trigger the attribution rules, meaning if a contributing spouse has made a payment in the current or previous 2 years, then they transfer an amount to an FHSA, again, during equalization discussions. It will be taxed as income to the spousal RSP contributor, and it will be deemed a new contribution to the FHSA holder. So in equalization conversations, you always want to make sure that a dollar equals a dollar. In this situation, is not exactly that. So you're taxing the money coming out of the spousal RSP to the contributor, possibly through the attribution rules, and you're benefiting the FHSA account holder with a contribution received for that same dollar amount. So be very careful when you talk to lawyers in the meetings in that situation, that every dollar equals every dollar going out. And in this situation, the attribution rules do apply. Okay, so something to keep in mind. Now, other things to keep in mind, RSP transfer to the FHSA means that it does not regenerate RSP contribution room. So if I were to move $8,000 from my RSP into the FHSA as my contribution, that does not mean that I'm all of a sudden generating $8,000 more in contribution room on my notice of assessment. Also, no first 60-day contributions, meaning January, February, we're rushing around taking lump sum RSP contributions in order to offset income for 2023. That's not the way this is going to work. FHSA contributions are only deductible in the year they're made or carry forward, but you cannot make a contribution in January or February and have it go back to 2023 income. That contribution has to be made in 2023. Also, it bears mentioning again, carry over up to $8,000, but maximum is $16,000 in any given year. So that contribution room can only be scaled back from the previous calendar year. Any over contribution in that capacity will be taxed at 1% per month. If you have a question about it, take advantage of that notice of assessment form, because as of next year, it will have all the information you need to guide the clients towards the different contribution limits. Now, let's talk about finally what Equitable Life has done and how the product looks. In the last few minutes, I want to take advantage of this. And so when we launched this product, we decided that we're going to put it into our 75-75 guarantee, as well as our 75-100 class option. Keep in mind, this is not necessarily just for the first generation. It could be that older clients, new immigrants to Canada, are coming in, which are much older, may be more suitable to a 75-100 class option. And if you deal with Equitable Life, you know that our 75-100 has a reset feature, discretionary reset features. So targeting clients becomes a question of the younger generation, 18 to 30, I would say, but also older generation or parents of those first-time home buyers that may be interested in assisting their child purchase a home. The benefit is obvious, as I mentioned, is tax-free investment growth, a tax deduction in the year of contribution, as well as tax-free withdrawal for the purchase of a first home. Far more superior to the home buyer's plan, but can run in combination with it. The competitive advantage that Equitable Life will bring to it is that all the benefits of the Pivotal Select will be rolled over. So after that 15-year period, we're going to clone the account into an RSP account and transfer the balance of the account, if you haven't used it, transfer the guarantees, transfer the resets, transfer the value and the funds into that RSP so that you don't have to worry about your client getting an income tax bill for that income. Okay, so that's what Equitable Life, that's one of the key advantages. It's not just offering that product, but being able to clone it into an RSP to take the pain and the worry out of that participation year-end feature. So what we've done is we've put this on the Easy Complete online application platform. We've given you 75-75 and 75-100 guarantee options. Keep in mind, our 75-75 has 12 new funds added to it last year. Sales charge options, no load chargeback 3, and no load chargeback 5, meaning you have the ability now to make full commission on it, so long as it's aligned with what the client's expectation is for withdrawal. And I say this not because we're going to ban it, but simply because it just makes more sense. You don't want to have to be charged back 2 years worth of commission if your client decides to withdraw it in 3 years and you've made a chargeback 5 purchase. Keep in mind, commission chargeback is applicable even in the event of a qualified withdrawal. So that chargeback could be triggered. Make sure that it aligns with your conversation with your client. If they're expecting to buy a home inside of 3 years, no load. If they're buying it 3 years and after, chargeback 3. And if they're utilizing the plan for a maximum 5-year stretch, then you can buy chargeback 5 and not worried about any clawbacks. As of right now, we're not certain of any programs available. So loan programs are not been developed. They may be later on, but right now, there's no loan programs and there's no systematic withdrawal plans available. That means that you can't draw the income out over 6 months or a year. You have to do it as a one-time withdrawal, hopefully for a qualified home purchase. Now, let's take a look. Per CRA, client opens up an FHSA. After 15 years, they don't use it, they lose it. That means that the account value is going to become fully taxable to the account holder. With Equitable Life, you open up the FHSA. After 15-year period, or when the client reaches age 71, we will clone the account and they will be transferred tax-free to an RSP or RIF as the contract continues. That includes the death benefit, reset, the maturity, and everything else. Now, there is a landing page which will include prospecting letters, client brochures, FAQs, and other product information, including the forms that I mentioned earlier. I urge you to take a look if you want to start marketing this to your client. What we're going to do for you is we're also announcing a contest where your client can win their contribution towards their 2024 FHSA. By opening up an account between now and December 31st, your client's automatically qualified to win that contest, $8,000 draw, and you as the advisor would win $2,000. That draw will take place on January 16th of next year. And if you're one of my advisors, I will call you. I will tell you your client won $8,000 and also that you won $2,000 at the same time. You and the client will have to complete a declaration and release form, including a skill testing question, which I'll probably have the answer to, but I want to return those to Equitable Life so you can receive the money. And again, my intention is to get you one of those big size, oversized checks so we can do a huge photo opportunity with your clients and post it on social media because, again, this is a huge contest. It's $8,000 towards their contribution for next year. It's something that I'm sure every client will appreciate. The parents, talk to them about whether or not they want to fund the $8,000 contribution. And listen in next week. I'll have a national call on this with more details. But I'm going to announce a sales idea where you don't just go for the $8,000. You ask for the full $40,000 up front. Reason why is because our GIC rates right now are through the roof, and it makes sense for you to take the $8,000, invest it in the FHSA for the client, but take the balance of $32,000 and invest it in a GIC ladder where you're going to come out with 10% growth in that ladder combined at the end of 4 years. I'll share more ideas and details in our national call. Otherwise, I'm happy to take any questions if we have time. Otherwise, Wendy, over to you again.